if parents feel like, oh my God, I've really messed up with my kids and I've said some really unskillful things, and I just want to probably just point out to parents that it's probably not your fault. It's probably kind of how you were raised. You're probably repeating patterns. It's not it wasn't necessarily a conscious choice, but we can, if we have done things like be really unkind to our kids, spank them, different things like that. It's really a really beautiful and human choice to go back and apologize and make a repair, right? Rupture and repair.
Welcome to the Prime Life Project podcast, a place to help you unlock your full potential, both mentally and physically, to become the best version of you. Welcome back to another episode of the Prime Life Project podcast. I'm your host, Daniel James, and today, if you are a parent, then this is going to be an absolutely fantastic episode for you. However, if you are not a parent, like myself, I'm not a parent, there's a lot of information in this episode that's going to be transferable to you in real life. So again, don't let the title of the podcast put you off, and don't let the intro put you off. I promise you there's a lot of transferable stuff here. Again, whether you're a parent now or you're going to be a parent, or you've got no interest in being a parent at all, as I said, the things we talk about are very, very transferable. My guest today is Hunter Clarke-Fields, and she is a mindfulness mama mentor. Hunter is the creator of the Mindfulness Parenting course and host of the Mindfulness Mama podcast, and widely followed author of her best-selling book, Raising Good Humans, a mindful guide to breaking the cycle of reactive parenting and raising kind, confident kids. Hunter started blogging and podcasting about parenthood when her kids were babies and believes that it's not just enough to know the right way to respond. It takes inner work to reduce our biological stress response so that we can access our more thoughtful, loving selves. She helps parents get their kids to listen without losing their shit, bringing more, her words, not mine, without losing their shit, bringing more calm and peace into their daily lives. Hunter is a certified mindfulness teacher who has over 20 years of experience in meditative practices and taught mindfulness to thousands worldwide. Hunter Clarke-Fields, how are we?
Hi, good. How are you?
I'm very, very well, thank you very much. Like I said, a bit of technical difficulties before we started, completely on me. Again, I'm normally super organized. Again, me and Mikey have a laugh and a joke about how anal I am about my organization. So yeah, completely my fault. How's your day been today?
It's been good, actually. It's been like yesterday was crazy, and today it's been like, just like a better pace.
I've also noticed behind you the little shelving units that you've got. I've actually got them downstairs in my staff room, like the homemade ones. Someone made them for me. And each one of them, one of my members of staff has got a little something in there that represents themselves. So when they're doing consultations, people can do it. So I've never seen anyone else have that design, but it looks really cool.
That's so funny. Well, cool. Yeah, I like octagons. They remind me of bees.
Yes.
Or I guess they're pentagons, I think. I don't know.
Do you know the difference? Yeah, I think they are Hexagons. I think you're correct. So today we're talking about being a mindful parent. And again, obviously, we spoke about your book in the intro. So can you just take me back to the start of your journey here about what got you interested in mindfulness? I know that you were a mindfulness practitioner before you had children. So how did this all sort of merge together, the two fields of mindful parenting?
Well, the mindfulness piece came about because I just like struggled with, I was like an emotional roller coaster, highly sensitive person, my whole life. And I started to read about mindfulness and started to study about it when I was a teenager. And that brought a lot of relief. And actually sitting down and practicing about like 10 years later, that was just a huge game changer. For me, I used to kind of fall into these emotional pits, like pretty regularly every like week or two, just kind of felt like I couldn't handle life. And then, once I started a regular meditation practice, and I kind of sat for 10 minutes a day for a few months. And at that time, I remember thinking like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just sitting here thinking the whole time, this isn't working at all. But then I looked back at like the rest of my life and I realized I hadn't fallen into any of those pits that I had fallen into for 27 years of my life until that point. So for me, it was this huge game changer that allowed me this just more equanimity and just be able to do more things. And so then when I had this child, I had this temper come out of me, this like incredible temper arise. Was yelling, I was scaring her. I realized I needed to like go back to that. I needed to bring that back into my life to help me calm down, to regulate my mind, to regulate my heart. So then if I had any possible chance of responding to her in any kind of skillful way or kind way, I needed to get a hit, regulate my own feelings. So that's really where so that came together with parenting, because I would like learn and study from these parenting coaches and at the time, and then I would be so frustrated because I couldn't implement it because I was like losing my beep, I was like losing it.
You're
And
allowed to swear on here.
oh,
Don't
I was totally like losing my shit like way, way too much. And I couldn't like respond the way I wanted to respond. I saw, oh, these things really need to talk to each other. Like mindfulness really needs to talk to parenting, because without those pieces to calm our own reactivity, all the like here's how to respond stuff is useless because you can't even access it.
I think it's an interesting, not just for parents then, just for people in general, because what you're talking about there, a lot of people, they'll go to courses, seminars, read books, whatever it is, to get this information to try and help other people and change the externals, when actually what they need to do is actually apply it to themselves first. I think sometimes we read these books or people tell us this information and we think, oh yeah, okay, cool. Then we do nothing about actually implementing it in our own lives. We just think because we've heard it once, that somehow it's going to make a difference. So just quite interesting, because obviously you said you had a bit of a temper. Previously when you were practicing mindfulness, when you said you go into these emotional pits and a bit of a roller coaster, was it actually your temper that was causing you problems back then, or was the temper just when your daughter was born, like how it manifested
That's a good
itself?
question. Yeah, I'm trying to think about it. No, I don't think before my daughter was born, it wasn't so much my temper. It was after my daughter was born, it was my temper. And I could really see actually kind of why, because I could see it was like my father's temper kind of coming out of me. And because there's not those people, when you're an adult, people don't just like respond to you the way children respond to you. It's like a whole new world of the way they respond to you. And I could see that like she would have these big upset feelings because she was highly sensitive, kind of like I was. So, and I could see after some reflection, I could see like I had this feeling inside me when she had these big upset feelings that it was unacceptable. It just felt like so unacceptable to me. And I realized that was in me because when I was little and I had these big upset feelings, my dad his temper would go off and he would yell at me and he would scare me. And so that message was really ingrained in me, that it's like unacceptable to have these feelings. And then I was just passing on the same pattern to her because I hadn't taken the time, I hadn't realized and taken care of all this stuff that was arising. It was like my own baggage that I needed to take care of. But I could see, oh, this is how stuff gets like passed on. And it was the exact opposite of what I wanted.
But I think it's so interesting that you realize that, because we had another guest on the podcast before, a guy called Paul Cope, that speaks about this. Basically, what you get is you get generations that basically it just whatever fault is built into that adult goes down to the child and built into them. And then the adult then does it to their children. And it's just a whole thing that just carries on going down. So your whole thing is then essentially that it's kind of has to stop with you, like you as the adult, you as the parent, you have the responsibility to actually stop the quote unquote abuse that you suffered as a kid. Like I say abuse, like not necessarily physical, but like the emotional abuse from the parents, by taking responsibility for what you're doing now. So then that child doesn't then carry on the same way that it got passed on before. Is that kind of how it works?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like we want to change these generational patterns. And the thing is, like, if we have, a temper or whatever it is, like we have to realize it's not our fault that that's there. Like, it's not my fault. I didn't choose. I wasn't like consciously choosing to yell at my kid. I didn't wake up and say, I think I'll like yell at Maggie at 2 p.m. today. No, like that doesn't happen. No one consciously chooses to lose it at their kid. Nobody does. So it's not our fault. It's not something we need to blame ourselves for, but it is our responsibility. It is something we have to take responsibility for, because there are all these effects, that maybe we probably experienced ourselves. So, and the opportunity is so beautiful, though, the opportunity there, because the opportunity is then you can raise a generation of kids who maybe don't have like a much smaller backpack of baggage than we have, right?
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing. It's like whenever I'm working with people and you break stuff back, it all comes back to childhood, which is why, again, my listeners will know that's why I'm so passionate about working with kids, because it starts there. Like I work with in the UK, like year 10 and 11. I'm not sure what grade that is in America, but they're like 14, 15, 16-year-old kids that I'm working with, because for me, that's when they're receptive to a lot of this information, like when you're trying to really get down to the core of it. So if we can sort of get it from the parental age where they're a lot younger, you can sort of embed it in there, it's absolutely amazing. But again, kids copy what parents do. So again, if mum's meditating, I'll meditate. I've actually got one of my clients and their kid, I think he's 4, gratitude journals every morning with her. And it's absolutely amazing to see. It's like, wow, like you're teaching that to your kid at that age. I think it's absolutely amazing. You mentioned a few times when you said about blame. Do you think that a lot of parents blame themselves? Because as you said, no one wants to shout at their kids. No. They do it. It's this automatic program that's going in there. It's their internal baggage. Do you think that then this blame then causes a negative spiral for the parents with their mental health, because they want to do better, but they're not quite sure how?
Definitely. I mean, and that's also a habit and a condition that's kind of conditioned in us from our own upbringing and our society and things like that. We live in a very judgmental society. Like it's, there's sort of this like patriarchal, judgmental kind of society. And so when we mess up, especially moms, it's interesting. I was talking to Kristen Neff recently for the podcast, and moms are less self-compassionate than women are less self-compassionate than men, which is so interesting for themselves. But have this like, harsh inner voice, like, you suck. I'm a terrible mother. I suck. How could I do this again? What's wrong with me? This is the kind of voice that is in most people's heads. It's really unfortunate, because then what happens is, say you do something like, in mindful parenting, we teach communication skills, and they're hard. It's hard to do. You're kind of stretching outside your comfort zone. You're doing something different. And the thing is, like, if you're doing something that's new and different, and you are inevitably human and mess up, because we all do, and then you are greeted internally with this voice that says, you suck, you can't do anything, how could you do that, blah blah blah, then you're not going to want to step outside of your comfort zone to try something new and do something new again. But if you can try something new, inevitably be human and mess up, and then give yourself a soft landing, give yourself some grace, talk to yourself the way you might talk to a good friend who is dealing with something similar, then you can recover just so much more quickly. You can get back up, you can try again, you can be more present for the people around you, for your child, to help them recover from whatever that mistake was. It's much more effective, and it's much nicer to go around in the world. And you're modeling a compassionate voice to yourself, because we're kidding ourselves if we think that we can be bitches to ourselves internally, and then our kid is we're going to just always be nice to our kids, and our kids never going to hear that. That's not true. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I must have been an adolescent or something, I remember seeing my mom look at herself in the mirror and say, "Oh, I'm so ugly." And you know what did I do at some point in my late teens, early 20s? I looked at myself in the mirror. I told myself how ugly I was. These things are they get absorbed by our kids who are sponges. And if we don't believe it, like, think about how none of us want to swear in front of our little kids. Why don't we want to swear in front of our little kids? Because we know that's what we're going to hear out of their mouths in the next week, right?
And that's the thing with me, because I don't know if my audience actually noticed, I've actually really, since we're working to schools, I've really reined in my swearing. But for me, before I went into schools, again, people, long-time listeners of the show will know this, like, I used to swear a lot. The reason behind that was because that's all I heard growing up. So for me, dropping the F-bomb, it means nothing. It's like the word "and." I just use it willingly. I will literally, but for me, people were like, "Oh, you swear a lot." I'm like, "Do I?" I wouldn't even notice that I would. It's just what I did. But again, because that's how I was brought up. I think the biggest thing as well that sort of you hit on there is that essentially kids at such young early ages, you're basically creating that kid's belief system, like their core beliefs on how they think the world should be. So again, if as a mum you've got a really bad relationship with food or something like that kid is going to pick that up, and their core belief is, I will have a problem with food. Food is not my friend, or whatever it is. And then that kid then takes it on, and it's something that the parent will have no idea that they've given to that kid, if that makes sense. So it's such, I'm not a parent, but it sounds like such a hard thing to do, because you literally always have to be on guard, it seems to me anyway, about what you're doing because the kid can just be picking it up? Is it, what's it like being a parent? Like, I know it sounds like a really stupid question, but I've got some clients that parents, and when I'm talking about all this sort of stuff and all the guests that I have on that talk about the stuff that happens from such a young age and the programming of kids, you now know this. You know potentially what your action is going to be passed on to your kids. How hard is that for you now that you know that? Does this make sense? Because if you're
it's incredibly hard. What you're pointing to is there's so much pressure on parents, and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And a lot of parents put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be perfect, to not make mistakes. And that's why that inner voice can be so incredibly harsh on ourselves, because we know our kids are kind of picking it all up. So it's hard to take the time to do things like kind of what we were talking about, is that we have to live what we want our kids to learn, right? We have to be role modeling is the best form of parenting, like just being a role model of somebody who's pretty emotionally balanced, fulfilled, who can be skillful with other people, all of those things. And so the problem is we want to do such a good job for our kids. We have this little being that we don't know anything about parenting. We get lessons on how to drive a car. Mm-hmm. We go into parenting and we're like, okay, I guess I'm winging it. And we have so much responsibility. We know all this responsibility. So a lot of the kind of old programming starts to kick in. And like for moms, a lot of it is like, sacrifice yourself for your child. And so that's kind of the old message that women were given. And so people end up doing that to feel like a good parent. Right. Mm-hmm. And men will do this too. And we don't realize that there's a lot of healing that we have to do, right? Like we have to kind of turn our lens sort of back on ourselves and say, okay, if I'm going to be the model, I have to like ground myself, right? I have to steady my heart, my mind, and my nervous system. I have to, there's some internal work for me to do here to heal some old wounds. And I think that this is an opportunity. Being in that parent-child relationship is an opportunity to heal old wounds. And we all go into it thinking, I'm not going to do X, and then I am going to do Y, and blah, blah, blah. And I'll just, and we have to have a lot of compassion because it just brings up all of this stuff for us. So we have to practice this compassion for ourselves and just kind of go for progress, not perfection, and because really, ultimately, the best a parent can do is good enough. That's literally the best you can do, because perfection is not an option. And perfection is ultimately leads to like, I'm never good enough idea anyway. And like and if some kid had perfect parents who met their every need, like that would be a totally messed up kid who couldn't handle life anyway. Right.
But you do get that, don't you? You do get that. Like you get kids that aren't prepared for the real world because they are so like basically wrapped in cotton wool because the parents almost over love them that the kid's just not ready for the real world. And you see that quite a lot.
Yeah. In college admissions, they call those kids teacup kids because they're like fragile little teacups that they can't handle the world. And we don't want that, right? Like we want our kids to be able to be able to handle all the ups and downs of life. But we don't have to manufacture them. They're going to happen.
So for me, I'd love to talk about how you actually work with parents then. So like I said, there's going to be a lot of parents listening to this and they're probably freaking out thinking, oh my gosh, like, right, okay, so you made some really good valid points here. I need to work on myself. How do you work with people, and what's like the first step that you would do working with a parent to actually help them turn inwards and work on themselves? What does that sort of structure look like?
Well, so I have like a mindful parenting method, right? And it starts with us calming our own reactivity, right? So the mindful parenting method has an acronym, which I was so pleased about. That means clear, right? CLEAR. And one is calming reactivity. And that's really the first place we start. We want to build habits that steady the heart, the mind, and the nervous system. And I do think of mindfulness as like the parental, it's like the 2,600-year-old brain hack, that helps us to just be able to, have that space between stimulus and response where we can make a choice rather than be reactive. Right. in that calming step means understanding our triggers, kind of doing a little work of like looking back into our own childhood. What are some things, what were things like for us? And then
But when you
learning
say
how.
when you say triggers, just for people who don't know what that means, could you
Mm,
just define what you mean by the word trigger?
okay, so I had a client who she realized doing this piece that like her toddler would like spill orange juice. And for her, it was like, it just made her crazy bananas that this happened, even though it's totally normal, completely innocuous toddler behavior. But she did the work of kind of looking back at her own childhood and realized, oh, she was really taught like, she should be always be neat and clean, and her household should be neat and clean. And that's part of her value as a person, right? And so that it was much more than what just this toddler was doing.
Mm.
That's what I mean by triggers. Like you have an outsized reaction to something that's pretty developmentally normal.
Yeah, you just like see red. So straight away something happens, you see red, and that's it. You got on this rabbit hole for 10 minutes of rage.
I discovered a trigger a few years ago with when my daughter was 9. We had movie night, and she like was all hyped up and didn't want to go to bed. And I'm like, oh, just ignore her. She'll go away. And then she laughed at me, and I was like, like it was like raging volcano of anger just like came up like a billion miles a second. And so it was this like new trigger like that I hadn't realized I had. Laughter. It was a super outsized reaction to just her laughing at me. And so what I did in that moment is actually something that you could do. I tried to, I ended up yelling skillfully. I was very proud of myself. I yelled, I'm really angry right now. And then I like slammed the door and walked up and down the street for 20 minutes to cool off. But I didn't blame her. I was very, very proud of myself for skillfully yelling.
It's interesting, isn't it? Even though you know all this stuff, you still get triggered by it. Like people think that somehow you know this stuff and somehow you're now immune to it. It's like, no, it still happens because, again, you're a human being. It is what happens.
Yes, exactly. All right. Yeah. So yeah, and that's a big piece of it. Like in that calm step, the last piece is just kind of how do we take care of our difficult feelings? Most of us were taught to just not cry, don't feel those things. Like that's basically our message. Don't feel those difficult feelings. So we have processes. This is how we do it. This is the middle path. And so that's all calming reactivity. And then the L stands for listen reflectively, creating connection. And that really kind of creates that glue that makes your child want to cooperate with you, where most of us are like the Charlie Brown parents. We're like, we talk too much. We got to listen a little more. And then E is expressing yourself honestly and effectively. A lot of us, we are reflexively, the way we talk to kids is very different than the way we talk to other adults. We give a lot of orders and commands. We threaten them. And there are better ways to communicate that are just more effective.
How would you sorry, just want to quickly loop back into the listening and then expressing yourself, because these are two I think real key points, not just for parenting but for people in life, because I think communication is something that people are very, very poor at, whether it's relationship with their kids or relationship with a partner or their boss or their friends. I think communication is almost like a dying art. So how do you listen properly? How do you teach people to listen properly? Because even with kids, like I know we're specifically talking about kids here, but I think people in general don't listen properly. So how do you actually get people to practice listening properly?
I think you're right that we're conditioned to listen in different ways. To listen properly, to me, I think it comes back to mindfulness, like noticing when we're all in our thoughts and I'm planning what I'm going to say next. And I'm thinking about the story of thing that happened to me. And then just kind of noticing that, because that's normal. And then just bringing your attention back to the speaker. So putting your eyes on the speaker, and that's the practice of mindfulness, is like being able to harness our attention and put it where we want it to be. And we're not like perfect at it, but we just bring our attention back without planning, going into the future of what I'm going to say or the past, and noticing when we're lost and coming back. So, and then also the obvious things like putting the phone down, closing the laptop lid. And if you're with a little person, like crouching down, getting
But
to
I
their
think
level.
that's a big thing I've learned about crashing down to level. So I did a workshop with Mikey on Monday, actually, and again, with loads of kids. And I noticed I was standing talking to them originally, but for whatever reason, I felt gravitated to kneel down so that I was then on their level because they all sat down. And they seemed to engage me a lot better when I was at their level, which is something I found quite fascinating. And it's interesting that you say this because, again, I know that you do your own podcast, which I mentioned in the intro as well. And again, I highly recommend people go and check that out. I'll get Mikey to ping the link across the bottom of the screen. A lot of people listen to talk. So obviously when you're talking, my brain's thinking, oh, that's a really good point. But then the problem is you're then thinking about that and then you then not focusing on the person talking now. So Mikey says to me, how do I write things down at the same time? I've managed to practice over all the episodes I've done. You probably find this as well, where you can listen to the person, so you quickly write something down, but you're still fully engaged in the conversation. Because before, you're like, the person's talking, like, oh, it's a really good point. Oh, it's a really good point. They stop talking and you're like, I can't remember what I was going to say next. Like I can't remember what they said. It's such an interesting thing when someone's talking so well with all this information they're throwing at you, and you're just like, oh, I need to try and remember all of this. It's quite overwhelming sometimes.
I know it's interesting to think about it as a podcaster because there are things you want to go back and remember. Like you want to remember that thing and to say it. Yeah. And sometimes I try to take notes and things like that. But I find that at least as a podcaster, when I can kind of when I can actually let go of my job a little bit more. I mean, to some degree, I'm there, like taking the notes, but to some degree, then when I can really be there and be present with that guest, sometimes that next question, anyway, just kind of naturally comes to me. But you're right, also about little children, um, and there's a reason why, and it's because just like we have that stress response, that threat response that causes us to lose our shit, little kids, that part of the brain is the part of the brain that's the most developed thing in the human body, like when we're born. And little kids have a threat response too that wants to keep them alive and keep them safe. And when an adult is towering over a small child, their stress response is like, uh-oh, tingle, tingle, there might be a threat. And so it's actually harder for them to listen to you, so that when you make yourself less threatening, it's easier for them to listen to you.
Again, Paul Cook made a good point with that as well, which is something that really blew my mind back. He's like, imagine kids when they're going shopping. And it's like you're there in a supermarket and you've got all these big adults that are towering over you. It's like, just imagine how scary that is. You're walking like the land of the giants. And as soon as you said that, I thought, that's a really good point, actually. Like, you never really think about these kids are so small and they're looking up at these giants, which again, I found was absolutely fascinating. So I just want to make sure that I went back to loop onto that about listening, because I think it's a really important thing. So again, the E was expressing yourself. So again, how do we go about doing that? Because as you said, it comes back to the mindfulness practice of gaining the awareness, taking back control, so that when something does get said, you're not just acting on impulse and shouting and getting angry. So how would you then actually express yourself? Okay, I don't know if this is the correct way of asking this question for a kid. Is there a correct way of expressing yourself to a kid?
Well, I mean, I think it can be helpful just to think of kids in some ways as just other human beings. Because, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry about that.
Oh, you're okay.
Podcast host. I'm so like a shock that I let my phone be on.
I'm going to say this story. Mike, have I said this story in air yet? I'm not sure if I said this story in air, but we'll keep this in because it's a funny story linking into Mikey. So we were on our way down to, I'm never going to live this down. We're on our way down to driving at Audi headquarters in London. So big car, I know they've got it in America, like the Audi HQ in London, talking at this corporate event. And I said to Mikey, Mikey, make sure your phone's turned on silent. So then Mikey does public speaking and all this sort of stuff. So he was there with video recording. 20 minutes into the presentation, Mikey's phone goes off. But the worst thing was, it wasn't even his phone. It was his own song. He does rap music as well. It was his own song that was playing. So everyone was laughing. It was a great icebreaker. It was really, really funny. So yeah, so it happens to the best of us. So no, it's honestly, it's all right. Never going to do that down, Mikey.
Poor Mikey. Yeah. So,
sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So I think, so one of the things I start with in mindful parenting is just some awareness of the ways that we express ourselves unskillfully, because we don't even realize it, right? So if you're like a 2-year-old, right, your whole day is filled with a series of commands and orders said to you. Put on your shoes, take off your shoes, get in the car, get in your seat, get down from the seat, wash your hands, put on your shirt. It's almost everything in your life is like a command, do this thing. And the truth is that, like, even if you're two, like there's no age at which people enjoy being ordered around. But no one at any age enjoys that. Um, and so 2-year-olds or whatever age, we naturally resist that. But that is the kind of habitual language with which we talk to kids. So one of the things, and we also kind of like my fallback when my stress response is really going and I'm really frustrated is threats, right? Like, we don't know what to do. So we're going to use power over our kids. If you don't do that, I'm going to take away your screen time for a week, right? Like that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the problem is both of those things are like orders and threats are two of the things I talk about 6 of them in the course, but two of the things that are pretty ineffective, right? Because in both cases, they cause your child to actively resist you, right? Like, because no one wants to be threatened and no one wants to be ordered. So it creates this like kind of habit of resisting all the, and resentment actually over time. So a very simple, there's a lot of different ways we talk about this, but a very simple way that I like to share that we can change the way we can talk to kids is just to think about like, if you were trying to get out the door and your mom needed to put her shoes on, how would you ask your mom to put her shoes on? You know, because, and this is so helpful because when we can speak to kids in a respectful way, they're gonna echo that back to us. That's the language that they're gonna use with their little siblings, right? Etc. If we bark orders, they're gonna see, like I saw when my daughter was 3 and I had a another daughter that she's gonna just bark some orders right over to her younger sibling, right? So we can start to think like, hey, how would I ask another a respected auntie to do that? Hey, you want to come over here? It's time to put on your shoes. Just simple little shifts instead of like barking orders. We can start to just ask our kids to do things in a nice
tone
way.
as well. The tone changes, doesn't it, as well? And obviously kids will pick up on the tone. So if you're talking to them nicely and pleasantly, then they'll be like, oh, this is going to be a nice experience. Where if you're shouting at them, it then causes issues. I think this goes back to, again, I don't know if I'm missing, obviously I know we've sort of 2 more points to go across. That goes back to, which I want to link into, is about the stress response for the adult. So if the adult's super, super stressed because they don't have control of their shit in their life, then what's happening is they're late getting ready because they've overslept, they haven't organized things, blah, 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 blah. Their life's hectic. And then they're then shouting at their kid. And it's not the kid's fault that they have not got their shit together. So it's actually quite an interesting sort of thing, isn't it? It's like, actually, when you're talking about that, just the way you said, how would you ask your mum to put her shoes on? I was like, well, your tone would completely change. Whereas if you're rushed, it's like, get your shoes on. That's very different to, would you mind putting your shoes on, please? Because we need to get ready to go. But only comes from that place, isn't it, of being calm.
Absolutely. And I just want to acknowledge here that like kids drive us bananas, right? Like they do things they're messy, they're loud, they're irritating.
You're selling it to me. You're selling it to me.
Yeah, you want to have some kids now, right? Like they can drive you absolutely crazy. So like the feeling of feeling stressed, I don't want to be blameful of the parents because the feeling of being stressed and freaked out because your kid is not listening to you can make you bonkers, right? But you're right. Like that's why all step 1 is all about calming reactivity because we're not going to be skillful. We're not going to be thoughtful when we're like losing it. And so our first step is always to say, what are those things we can do to, okay, I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling threatened. I'm feeling really irritated. And it's going to be faster, honestly, to calm yourself down. Take a minute to like put your hands on the ground, breathe deep breaths, like maybe shake it out, shake your hands out, and then, do some sigh breaths and then say, okay, what's going on with my kid? They're really wanting to play. And part of listening is also like acknowledging what's going on for the other person, right? So you're really wanting to play. You don't want to stop right now and you don't want to go, I know that stinks. And it's still time to go. We got to get there because of XYZ. So come on over here and, or here are your shoes and the shoes are saying, hello, will you come and, put me on, we can do things like that, but we can't do any of that when we're like losing our shit.
Yeah. No, that's really important. I want to sort of go back to, because I said it all starts with us. As you said, if you go from that calmer place, it actually saves you time. because I said you're in a
Yeah.
calmer place, the kids can listen to you. It's then not another added stress. So again, I think it's a really important thing. So we've covered so far calming, listen, expressing yourself. What's the A?
A is attend, be present, right? So like get yourself out of all the things you have to do later today. Be here, notice what you're feeling, notice what's going on with your kid, right? And this is mindfulness. Can I bring my attention to the present moment with an attitude of kindness and non-judgment, right? Curiosity. Can I be curious about what's happening in this moment? And that's a practice, right? We practice to do it. So can I just really be there? And this attend piece is really it underlies so much because it's interesting. It's like we can't do all the things we want to do from the mindset of the future, right? We have to be here. We have to be in reality, noticing
Yeah,
what's really
yeah.
happening, right? And then the R stands for resolve. And so solving problems, because conflict is normal, natural, resolving problems based on needs. So rather than, I don't know, rather what happens with most people with conflicts is we get stuck at the level of solutions. We have to do this because of this. We have to do this because of this. But if we get to the underlying level of needs, hey, listen, this is what I'm needing. I'm needing to get to my job at a reasonable time, on time. And what are you needing? And so then if we can get into maybe not in that point of the really difficult moment, but we can get into another moment. We can say, listen, mornings are difficult. I really need to get out of the house. You really want to play. What's going on? How can we both meet our needs, right? So how can you have time to play and I get to work on time, right? So rather than saying, and I think this is so helpful because kind of the old way was always, my way or the highway, and the parents like push our solutions onto kids, and kids kind of resent that over time. And then you've got, we use our power, and then kids have adolescent rebellion, because they resent their parents.
Mhm.
And it's kind of, a lot of times we're modeling in the family that like the one with the most power always wins, right?
Yep.
And if we can instead model, hey, I've got some needs, my needs are matter and they're important. You've got some needs, and you know what? Your needs matter to me too. How can we figure out how we can both get our needs met? That's amazing. Imagine if we could model that in the micro level of the family and then in the macro level of the world. It's pretty powerful.
That was amazing as well. That was a really interesting point for me, who's not in a relationship and doesn't have a kid, that actually understanding that when it comes to relationships with not necessarily even romantic relationships, but actually members of staff, for example, like I've got needs, I need you to do this, but actually you've got needs as well. How can we come together? That's actually a really powerful thing you just said there, actually, because again, from that place of power, although technically, yes, what I say should go, I then don't want people to resent me because that's not what it's about. It's about, right, I need this thing doing. Right, what do you need? How can I help you? How can you come together for that compromise? It's actually really interesting you said there. And again, when it comes to this whole thing we spoke about, I think it's a really interesting thing, not just for parenting, but for life in general. It seems to be really real common crossover with stuff. But it's like it's amazing for me to see that. And yeah, you made me think there, which is interesting. I'm looking forward to listening back to this to pick that part of it and take my own notes on that. One thing that's just stuck in my mind here when you were talking was, let's say we've got parents that listen to this right now, and let's say they've got kids, and they're thinking, "Oh my God, like I've screwed up here. Like Hunter's telling me I've got to do all this stuff. I've not been doing any of this." How do they go about implementing this? Because if they've been a certain way with their child and they straight away go and try and implement this change, the kid's not going to play ball. So how do you coach parents to essentially undo some of the stuff they've accidentally done, like the stress, how they talk to their kids, all that sort of stuff? Where do you start with that?
Well, I mean, I always encourage parents to start with the first step to like calm their reactivity, right? Like that, being able to not yell so much, to lose it less, that really makes a big impact, right? If they can step back, if they can pause, they can have a more thoughtful response. Just that alone can be life changing, right? And if parents feel like, oh my God, I've really messed up with my kids and I've said some really unskillful things, and I just want to probably just point out to parents that it's probably not your fault. It's probably kind of how you were raised. You're probably repeating patterns. It's not it wasn't necessarily a conscious choice, But we can, if we have done things like be really unkind to our kids, spank them, different things like that, it's really a really beautiful and human choice to go back and apologize and make a repair, right? Rupture and repair. And so if and there's no time limit. Like if you can go back and say, hey, I've realized, like, the way I talked to you last year when you were struggling with this, it wasn't so kind. And what I wish I'd said at that time was, hey, it's okay for you to have all the feelings you want to have. And I'm here for you and I support you and I love you. And that's great. Like, you can even write your kids a note if you want to make a repair. That can be really, really beautiful, because the thing is, like, unresolved issues, they can kind of be toxic for kids. Kids can misrepresent parents' motives. They can blame themselves. But if we can go back and say, I'm going to begin anew. I'd like to begin anew. I wasn't such a nice person last year, last month, whatever. And now I'm going to try to yell less. I'm going to try to do these things. I'd love for you to help me do it.
Mm.
You can even say that to your kids and they'll be like, Mom, you said you were not yell so much, right? Or you said you were going to do this. My kids told me, super accountable. When your mom's a mindful mama mentor, like, woo, you get it right back at you if you're in an unskillful place. So,
I love that.
but
I
that's
love that.
great. It can be really helpful. It's okay to be human with our kids. It's okay to model vulnerability. It's okay to model making amends. Like, that's really powerful.
I think again, as a parent listening to this, because again, obviously I have parents, I don't think there's ever, I know you mentioned it, like it's never too late to say this, at any point, at any age, to actually apologize for anything you realize. So let's say, for example, someone listening to this in the 50s and 60s, and you've got kids in their 20s or 30s, and you're listening to this thinking, oh my gosh, actually going and apologizing is such a major thing, and actually taking ownership for it. So I was talking to somebody the other day, someone just met for the first time, and obviously with what I do, they were really, we always go, whenever I meet new people now, we always end up going down a mental health sort of path and topic. And she was talking about her parents and her dad, and she basically turned around and said that she noticed that her mum was a bit controlling, but then she spoke about how when her dad came back into their life, straight away he didn't try and blame the mum. He took complete ownership. He says, I'm really sorry, bam 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 bam. And she said that was the best thing ever, because he didn't try and make excuses. He took complete ownership. He apologized, and straight away her guard went completely down, because he completely owned it. So I think just parents listening to this again, it's never too late to just apologize and be like, you know what, I did the best that I could. So I think that's ultimately what you said at the very, very start. Like, there's no manual for this. Even at life, forget being a parent, there's no manual for life. So when you make mistakes in life, actually just owning it and apologizing, because I've had to do that as well. Again, long time listeners will know about my story. I've gone and had to apologize to a lot of people when I've realized what I'd actually done to people and how I'd made them feel, because it didn't sit right with me. And I've never had a bad response, because people are like, I really appreciate that. So again, at any age, I think that's very, very powerful. It's one of those powerful things you've actually said there. Actually, just once you realize, do you know what, I probably wasn't the best parent, but I tried my hardest, and you just apologize, I'm really sorry I did that. I think that goes a long way. That's really powerful.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people ask me, like, when's the right age to, like, kind of do different things. And I taught mindful parenting to an in-person group in my area at one point, and this grandmother was there because she was like taking care of her 6-year-old, her grandson. And at the end, we were talking about things, and she was happy things were better with her 6-year-old, but she said she, like, got teary-eyed. So it was so moving. She said that she had healed things with her adult daughter through the course of this, and I was just like, oh yes, I mean, that's amazing. Like, it's never too late. It's never too late to have better human relationships, right? Because these are the things that give us the most satisfaction and the most fulfillment in our lives, as our relationships.
Absolutely. And that's on any level. I mean, Michael was talking about this again a few days ago, I think, talking about relationships and people that got close to us. I think such a powerful thing. I just want to link back to one thing that I've heard you say before about empathy, because you referred to empathy as a parenting superpower. So I know we've touched on this a little bit, but can we just sort of like succinctly summarize why empathy is such a parenting superpower?
Well, it kind of goes back to that listening, right? And listening, how listening kind of creates connection. And so empathy is the idea of feeling with, right? Not like sympathy. Oh, look, you're down there in that hole. You feel terrible. That's too bad, right? But like kind of getting down there and saying, "Oh, I've been there. That sucks. I hear you," right? So for our kids, anytime they come to us for with anything, right? They want to be seen and heard, right? Like they are asking to be seen and heard. Like anytime they approach us with anything and anytime they have a problem with their sibling, with their friend, with their dog, whatever it is, anytime anybody comes to you, not just kids, but really anybody, anytime anybody comes to you with a problem, if we can listen, be present, right? Practice to really be there, practice to listen, and then offer them empathy. You know, oh gosh, that must have been hard for you, right? Then that feeling of really being seen and heard is so healing. Like that in itself, just being present and being seen and heard, that empathy it has incredible healing power. And for parents, it brings closer connection, right? And why this is different from what we normally do, because normally when somebody comes to us with a problem, say your adult child comes to you with a problem, or a friend comes to you with a problem, or a partner comes to you with a problem, a lot of times the thing we do is we want to fix the problem and make it go away.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so frustrating to be the person who has a problem and go to somebody who just tries to fix it right away. But if we can say, ah, like acknowledge that was hard or whatever, have an empathetic response, feeling what they may have felt with them, using our imagination to do that, then that feeling of really being seen and heard, it really builds connection. And
Mm.
that's really what we want to do, is build connection.
I think that was, again, just some amazing things there. A kid should also be seen and heard, and the fact of the whole point of empathy is that you're feeling with them. I think that's, again, that I don't actually know if that's a definition of empathy or something, but I don't that really struck called me that, and I wrote that down. Feeling with them. I don't know, something about that was very beautiful how you said that. Like, again, I don't have a kid, but I've got a goddaughter, so it's when they go through that pain or that struggle, feel it with them. Because I talk about it in a coaching perspective when I talk to my coaches, like when you're in a training session with a client, be in that set with them. Like you're there, you're feeling what they're going through, so then you can actually help them, and like you're there, you're feeling it with them. So again, it's the same sort of thing here with the kid. Like
Mm-hmm.
just feel it with them, like actually validate their existence. Which again, me and Mikey were literally talking about this off air, weren't we? About the whole thing about a lot of adults basically seek validation because they never got it as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
How do you give a kid validation? You see them and you hear them. I mean, you just let them know, I hear you, like I see you, I hear you, like cool, let's talk about this. This has been powerful for me. Like I said, again, it's parenting's never been on my list of things to do, but the stuff you're talking about is going to help me with clients. Again, be more empathetic and understand. Like I kind of get it a bit more now. But not only that, just relating it back to my life and relationships with adults. Because again, I didn't know where this podcast episode was going to go. But in all honesty, because again, I said to Mike, I'm not a parent. I just knew that the whole mindful thing about this can be awesome for my audience. But for me, on a personal level, this has been really, really powerful and really, really insightful. So I want to say thank you very much, because you've been absolutely awesome. My final question here that I have for all my audience, but I've kind of twisted it a little bit to fit with the conversation we're having today. And we've spoken about a lot of stuff here, by the way. Like the whole the clear thing was brilliant. So calming, listen, express yourself, attend, resolve, absolutely brilliant. But what advice would you give to parents that feel stuck and out of control with their life / their children?
I would encourage them to start with some compassion for themselves, because it's really hard to be a human being on earth. It's really, really hard to be a parent. And it's really hard to feel stuck. And there's so many causes and conditions that have led to that. And so I would encourage them to talk to themselves as if they would talk to a friend who is suffering in the same way, and to just offer themselves some kindness. And from that foundation of kindness, then then take those steps, then take those steps to heal and grow. And they're going to come out of, when you have a foundation of kindness, you're tapping into your inner wisdom and your inner knowing, right? Instead of being hard on yourself, then those next steps are gonna feel right.
I absolutely love that. Again, that was absolute gold. I didn't know what you're going to respond with that. And that was beautiful. Do you have a question, Mikey? I've not done this before, by the way, on an actual live recording with it. Mikey, do you want to come around and ask this question? Because I said, obviously, Mikey being a parent, I want to actually see if Mikey's got a question for this. Like, yeah.
Hello, how you doing, Hunter?
Hi, Mikey.
Hello. I've got a 1-year-old. Yeah, so a lot of the content today has been just being mindful, having them conversations with your little people. But even starting from now, how can I implement everything that you've been talking about with my 1 year? She's got a really big character, but I'd love to know sort of how I can be really, again, mindful, present, and just be there with her and give her the optimal experience as a 1-year-old.
Sure. Yeah. So for a 1-year-old, right, we want to be at kind of every age. Our kids' emotions are contagious, right? And our kids regulate their emotions through us. And particularly your 1-year-old regulates her emotions through you, right? So when you soothe her, she feels soothed. That's how she learns how to soothe herself, right? Is from being soothed by you guys. And so you can start to practice emotional intelligence and respectful communication now. Like you can absolutely do it now. You can say, I'm going to pick you up and put you over here to change your diaper. Is that all right with you? All right, here we go, and you can start that right now and just treat her as I know that when my first daughter was born, it was like, holy crap, there's like a whole other human being in this room now, right? Like there's a fifth person in this room where before there were 4. Oh my God. And sometimes along the way we forget that. But like with your 1-year-old, just try to remember that she's a whole and complete human being, and start to even though she can't respond to you, start to converse with her or talk to her in a way that is respectful, asking her consent, even if she can't give it, to go onto the changing table is an example of that. But that does that make sense to you, Mikey?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Even a mature attitude towards that.
Awesome.
I love that. That was really helpful.
Yeah, he says, I don't know if the microphone's a bit too far away then, but he said, no, it's really helpful. So, no,
Okay.
Honestly, because I said, obviously, Mike is a parent. I want to make sure that he got an input in this because obviously I'm coming at it from a place of a non-parent and trying to think of my audience. But actually, Mikey is a parent, so he would be the person listening to this. I want to make sure that he had that, which would be brilliant. Where can people find out more information about you? So I'm going to get Mikey to put all the links at the bottom. What are your social media links, your website? Where's the best place for people to get in contact with you and learn more about you and get your book?
Sure. You can everything should be linked up at mindfulmamamentor.com. You can find me at Instagram at mindfulmamamentor. And Raising Good Humans is everywhere books are sold and in audiobook form, which is good for the podcast listeners.
Is it you that listens to it as well? Sorry, is it you that reads it? Sorry, do you read
it? Isn't that sad that they didn't have me read it?
Oh,
They didn't. I don't think they thought it was going to be. It's become like a bestseller, but I don't think they realized that that was going to happen.
And you've got a good voice as well. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, some people got like you're like, yeah, actually. So for example, our friend, the guy we mentioned earlier on, Paul Cope, he's got a Scouse accent. Now, again, I don't know anything about English accents, but the Scouse is one of the worst accents in the UK. But even he won't mind me saying that. Even he does his own audio thing for his audio book. So you've got a good voice. I thought, that would have been the perfect thing.
I know. Maybe for the next book, I'll read my own book.
Amazing. What's the name of your podcast again? So for the audience.
The Mindful Mama podcast, and we have like over 330 episodes to dive into, so a whole big back catalog to check out.
That's amazing. And is it all again aimed at kind of all your principles about becoming essentially the best parent that you possibly can be?
Absolutely, yeah.
Amazing. Honestly, this has been absolutely incredible. And like I said, although I'm not a parent specifically, this genuinely for me has been an amazing episode. And again, how you've actually articulated this subject has been fantastic. And I've got a few little take homes as well. So thank you very much for your time. This has been amazing.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I really enjoyed this more than I enjoy most interviews. It was really a pleasure.
I love that. Thank you very much.